Dzień dobry wszystkim, będziemy powoli zaczynać. Moi drodzy, mam przyjemność zapowiedzieć kolejny wykład.
Hello everyone, I have a pleasure of announcing the next lecture, which will be interesting for everyone who wants to know more about the tools supporting a creative process, about Final Cut, about supporting features of AI in the creative process. This will be held by Jacek Nagłowski, philosopher, producer and pioneer in new technologies in movies. So you can say that if somebody can evoke magic with the help of artificial intelligence, it's him. They say that if AI could speak, it would ask Jacek Nagłowski to support them with the knowledge rather than the other way around. Jacek Nagłowski, great applause, please. Nobody ever introduced me like that. I hope you will not be disappointed. Let me start from that my first plan for this, my first agenda, my first idea that I wanted to tell you here about, was about mixed up definitions related to artificial intelligence. And this topic I sent to Marta, and Sławek called me and said, you're talking to Film Spring Open and not in the philosophy department. So please make it a bit more amenable. Do something which is more palatable to people. Nobody will come to your lecture. So I changed the topic of my lecture, and right now it's from script to Final Cut, and this is actually a clickbait because in reality it is a bit of a clickbait because everything I say can be used between from scriptwriting to Final Cut. But if you came here to learn about the tools which you should use between scriptwriting and Final Cut, you will not learn that here because that's what we will be discussing. That's something we'll be discussing in groups. I wanted to tell you something more general, but much more important from my point of view. How to approach these systems, and to know how to approach these systems, what is usable between scriptwriting and Final Cut, we need to chat on about what these systems are. And in relation to that, sorry Sławek, but we have to start from mixed up definitions related to artificial intelligence. So I identified 13 definitions. I will not throw all of them at you, but I selected a few of them that are most important from the point of view of creative process. A few of them means 10, and I wanted to tell you about them, and I will tell you what are the sort of what's the result of that, and how to approach these systems for the effect of this cooperation to be the most sensible and the most comprehensive. I pressed end. So, okay, first. The first thing I wanted to tell you about is the most controversial one, that a myth which is very broadly believed is that artificial intelligence is technology, and it is a tool. This is a basic expression that we use towards those systems. And this is the most important slide from the point of view of my presentation. I will focus on this because many of my further thoughts spring up from what is here. And the first thing I wanted to tell you about is that this big cauldron of artificial intelligence, we tend to throw in there everything that processes data. But starting from the 1950s, from the very start of artificial intelligence, there were two different approaches which are sort of competing against one another. The first one, which was developed until 2017 and is behind all the recommendation systems in Netflix, etc., the algorithm of searching the internet, is a symbolic approach, which means according to certain rules. Acting according to, it was a concept that if you wanted to make an artificial intelligence, it has to follow certain rules of our thinking. So we try to implement in the silicon our mode of thinking and create artificial intelligence like that. We did that for several dozens of years. It didn't work very well, but the great breakthrough took place in 2017 when the second approach, which was already present but impossible to implement until that moment, so associative, according to certain association, it occurred to be possible. Google made it as the first ones in their attention is all you need algorithm. So it's not about implementing our rules into the system, but the system to make associations between the data by themselves is much more effective, and this is what we call generative AI. Whether it's image, whether it's sound, whether it's a written word, this is that we use today. This is all associative type of AI. Okay, maybe this will be a bit more stable for me. So now, what happens when we have a system that does not think, does not reason, but associates? What happens is that it associates words, which we call tokens, to simplify things. So when it associates tokens, it creates clusters of words, and those clusters of words is exactly of what we call ideas, concepts. What these models work on are not strings of symbols. These are concrete concepts, concrete ideas and meanings. These systems process not symbols, not words, but meanings. The fact that it works like this, we can talk about this during our closed group. I will be getting more in depth into that. But here, I would like you to suspend your disbelief. And you can please believe me for a while that this is how it works. And now only this, processing meanings and processing ideas, is comparable to what we call thinking. One of pretty obvious arguments for the idea that it's not a typical tool that we use it as we normally understand it is that if a tool works in an unpredictable way, we believe that this is an error. In terms of generative systems, however, if a system behaves in an unpredictable way, which means it does something that we would like to do, but it surprises us, it is a positive result, which means that the system works well. We never had such tools in history that would work well when they do something else that we wanted. Usually errors are being eliminated, and here errors are being supported. They're being strengthened. And now getting to the gist of the story, when I'm saying it's not a technology, I'm not saying it has nothing to do with technology. What I'm saying is that artificial intelligence is to technology what literature is to grammar. It is based on technology, based on the technology and algorithm that we've done. We created, humans. Something is being created that we create a model with which we interact, but this is a thing that is being built on technology, but it learns spontaneously. These are self-learning algorithms, and only this is something we call artificial intelligence, not algorithms that are at the foundation of this thing. And now symbolic thinking, the logical thinking according to the rules, can be used for pretty simple problems, where we're able to track the cause, the result, the whole logical process. However, this is not the only way of thinking. The thinking that we deal with in case of associative processes are much more useful. They're much better in reasoning about complex systems. about systems where it's difficult to foresee and to see those logical modes. And thanks to the fact that this process that is not obvious is language. That's why in language this associative paradigm was used as the first one, and it worked as the first one. But it occurred that the same way of thinking can be used for all other domains, like image, like sound, and solving many other problems. And that's why we have this boom that we have, that we're dealing with right now. But because if it is so, if these systems have technology at the foundation, but are not a technology, do we have any intuition what we're dealing with really? We don't, because we don't have systems which are emergent, and they're not. I mean, sorry, we do, because we do deal with such systems. Maybe that be a bit of a poetic example, but if you want to learn anything more about the wind, the information about how individual particles interact with one another will not tell you much. If you want to imagine what is the ocean, the information about the interactions of particles of the ocean will not tell you much. The same applies to the river, etc. If you want to learn about society, the information about individual units will not tell you much, because this is an emergent creation that has its own rules. And we're dealing with the same in terms of AI. In case of AI, the information about how individual algorithms work, which generate these connections between the systems, will not tell you much about how the whole system works. A better intuition about this is thinking about it as of a complex system. It's like a wind, it's like the ocean, it's like a society, to put it in poetic terms. But in reality, it is a better approximation. The better approximation is like institutions, which are better approximation of complex systems and give you a better idea what the artificial intelligence is, more than when we think about it than a typical computer system that follows a certain logical. And here, sorry, it will be a bit complicated, but AI systems are adaptive statistical systems of statistical processing of information. What is important also here is that they're adaptive, is that they are they sort of shape themselves together with how they're trained. They adapt they to the environment, and they also change in the interaction with us. I'll talk about this to a greater extent, because this is a great caveat, a very important caveat. But this adaptiveness of those systems and their adaptation to ourselves determines how effective we are in working with those systems. So now a bit more about the same slide. So if we're talking about the technology, we think about it like engineers, but the way these systems are being created, really, it's not engineering like. It's much closer to horticulture. We don't train those systems. We train those systems. We raise those systems. All the competences of the systems that the forecasting of meaning, generating the image, etc. All these are competences that nobody designed in those systems. We discovered them inside. The whole problem, the whole development of these artificial intelligence systems is in that we take those algorithms, we put data inside, and then we are astonished to say, wow, it can do this, it can translate, it can continue a style, it can solve a test, answer questions, etc., etc. The more data we put in those into this, the more we discovered what these systems can do. It never happened the other way around. Not in any aspect that we ever dealt with. So once again, another intuition, another metaphor. So this is closer to gardening, that we're growing some sort of a plant based on the data, and it grows, and then we maybe prune it in different ways. And we deal with it when we enter interaction with AI. And a different parallel and certain proximity to certain systems is that every AI model is unique. Even if we take the same algorithms and we feed them with exactly the same data, it is not possible to get the same model twice. This model will always be a bit different because such minor things like decrease of voltage on processors, and you have like hundreds of processors during training, will determine the difference in the model. Just like you can, if you have the same plants on the same soil from the same type of seeds, each plant is different, and you can never achieve the same model again. And this is the first, I would say, basic framework for us to imagine what we deal with. The second mistake that stems from this and from this thinking that we have that these are just computer like pieces of software is that we expect that it will work in a logical way. And it makes like a logical processes. Ladies and gentlemen, AI is horrible in mathematics. They cannot count. They cannot calculate. We have to teach them to calculate. They don't know if 9.9 is more than 9.11, for example. These systems are not mathematical at all. We need to implement certain operations for them to understand better the mathematics. But this is, I would say, this is derivative. The basic thinking of this model, basic associations, because everything is based on associations, is very different. And because this is based on associations, then a much better way of thinking about these models is it's an artificial intuition, not artificial intelligence. Here, I'm not referring to intuition as a certain mystical muse or metaphysical muse, but to a very simple observation related to the fact that if you enter a new environment, then regardless of how many books you read about this environment, whether it's an institution or this event here, you don't know anything about them. Only when you are inside, when you see interactions with people, when you build a certain model of how this institution, like for Film Spring Open, how it works, who with him, why, how, you're not even able to express this. You only know how it works intuitively. This is exactly how those systems work. They make associations by analogies, and so it's much more an artificial intuition than artificial intelligence. But also intuition is a way of thinking. It's also a form of intelligence. We use it every day very extensively. So it is a form of artificial intelligence. But the term artificial intelligence leads us to think that this is a logical processor. It starts to be logical only as a derivative because it starts to imitate ways of thinking. But basically, it works on associations. It works very quickly. And this is where you have this, I refer to the authority. 2002, Kahneman introduces the notions of thinking fast and slow, and he gets so system 1 and system 2 thinking. System 1 thinking fast is associative reasoning, very blurred, very like a bit erroneous. That's why these systems always make a mistake. There's always a certain margin of error of what they can associate within themselves, because that's how they work. But they work. Thanks to that, they work very fast. The system 2 thinking, like logical thinking, analysis, step by step, is thinking that supplements the associative thinking, intuitive thinking. So please take that into account, that these systems are basically intuitive, and only secondarily, derivatively, they learn how to recreate certain modes of thinking and certain schemas of thinking. So a lot of terms and a lot of criticism towards the artificial intelligence, like, next token plagiarism machine. Chomsky used that towards AI, next token predictor, and stochastic parrot. The problem is that, first of all, AI systems is not a database. It's not that the data that the system learns on are included inside, and the system selects fragments from this. It works in such a way that the system in the training data sees certain patterns and selects certain links and certain associations of elements, how things work together, and learns only that. However, all the data on which it was trained, it's not in there anymore. So the basic proof for that is that we train models on petabytes of data, and the model then is included, sort of covers just a few gigabytes, because it remembers only relations and not the data itself on which it was trained. So it's not a database. And the second very important thing, these systems do not spew forth symbols or words. It doesn't think in words. They connect things as, like statistically, of course, they spew forth, but not words, but meanings that they work on. So what these systems do, they foresee the whole sequences of meanings that are combined together, and not sequences of symbols which has nothing behind them. This is a very important division. To a certain extent, it's very important. You can get an intuition that this is a sort of a brain, this is a sort of human mind that works on meanings, but here we have a very important thing that this is a very non-human model of the world. So we deal with something that spews forth words and sounds and images. But what is behind those meanings? These meanings, it's not a reflection of what we have in our heads, but it just happens so that these collections of meanings, the collection of meanings that we feel in our heads, they are very similar, and we believe that the system is talking about the same thing, but it's more often than not true. Another error that stems from the previous errors is that AI is for automation. That's not true. To make AI a tool for automation is like talking that cows are tools for making milk, and the forests are tools for making wood, and the human is a tool that is used to produce things in a factory. Is that not true? It is true to a certain extent, but we reduce other systems to those functions. But every time, let's remember that this is a reduction. So yes, AI systems, we can reduce them to automate certain processes, but this is not covering what they really can do and what they're capable to do. It's one of possible uses. What's important and what we can do towards the AI processes, of course, we can reduce humans, pigs to a certain function and use automating systems based on such a reduction. So we can have a pig farm that produces, the cow farm which produces milk based on cows. We can have a digital farm that produces in an automated way certain outputs using artificial intelligence systems. But it's not that AI automates it. We are automating the systems with the help of AI. Another mistake that is of very profound meaning is thinking that AI is disembodied, is a ethereal being. The thing is, this IT domain is a certain isolated domain. and it does have its embodiment. These systems operate on concrete servers and concrete computers, which eat up a lot of energy, to the extent that in order to train the next generation of models, Microsoft is building new nuclear plants that will be powering only those data centers that will create new models. Because the situation we got the situation that the next generation of the models that will appear, it occurred that this computer that is needed to generate it, it has to have several thousand graphics cards in one place, but in order to get a computer in one state like that, at the level of about 100,000 graphic cards, the grid cannot support that. So the problem is they have to build nuclear plants to supply power to those data centers to be able to train next generations of models. So this is very physical, but the materiality, the physicality of those systems has one more feature that is related to having a body. It feels that we believe that they don't have perception, but they do. So you have to change thinking of what perception is. Their perception is the context box, is where you put in your prompt. This is where the model checks what's happening in reality. This is the only point of contact of the model with the reality. It's us who, when we enter in interaction with the model, we are their environment, against which sort of is a mirror of the reality. So we have a lot of impact how this system works and what sort of output we will receive. However, as this perception of the model that is based on receiving the text, the model only sees the text or only the image that it is being fed. It's their only sense, it's the only sensor. So if it's trained only on a text before, just like LLMs, we deal with some sort of a mind, but it's a mind which has a world built out of something very different from what we have. We see the reality through a constant stream of data that reach us through our eyes, through touch, through gravity, through interaction with reality at different levels. These models learn based on only one sense. So, for example, images, so this different perception and reality of a model creates a totally different model of reality. So if you think about what model of reality has a person who is born and does not see anything from birth. So if you try to imagine that such a person on one hand works very well in reality, but their imagination, their perception of what the table is different from our imagination, because we saw this table from the from birth, because they don't have the visual component. It has to be supplemented in some or substituted by something. What the table is. How does a person who is born blind, how different is the perception to the people who can see the table. So what is a table for the model is different from what it is for us, regardless of the fact that, of course, there is a certain idea of a table there, which can be very concrete. It can have a political meaning, it can have a family meaning, it can have a social meaning, it is made of wood, etc. All these meanings are being built around it, but these are at all times, these are very different meanings, because our toolbox of senses is very different from the model's ones. And now moving to the other side of this equation, I mentioned here that these are like totally different ways, sort of mentalities than the human mentality, and the processes that are behind the processing of the meanings are very different from what we have in our heads. One of the important things is that in our brain we have a lot of structures which process information, which enter interaction between themselves, that correlate. We process differently the things that come from our body. We have a different processing of what comes from our senses. We have our cortex, prefrontal cortex, which integrates all that. But all these systems are based on only one architecture. It's a transformer that combines everything. Can you speak slower? Thank you. I will also try to be a bit more articulate. So we have a situation in which we have a lot of cognitive architectures in our heads, and there's only one cognitive architecture which processes all the information there. This is incredible that this one architecture gives such good results, which are so close, but it doesn't change the fact that the image of the world that is there and how these models work is totally inhuman. So, if we're thinking about the human intelligence and artificial intelligence, comparing these two is like comparing our mind to the mind of an ant or an octopus who has a totally different way of thinking, or an alien or collective intelligence. So, like the intelligence of a certain group of people is different from individual intelligence of people. So let's not anthropomorphize AI. Let's not believe that there's something there that thinks exactly as we do. There's something that thinks in a different way than we think normally. I said before that they adapt to environment, but they adapt only to in a very limited scope. Because when we function in an environment, we constantly change our model of reality. It's being modified at all times by all events that we interact with. A model once trained stays the same, and nothing changes inside anymore. Only the next generation of models is different because it's supplemented by another data. But our interaction with the model is not remembered by the model. It is frozen for all times as it was trained. So this also causes, and you have to remember about that when you will be prompting your models of all sorts, that this model, and I will jump across the two and I will come back to hallucinations. These models have no memory. They learn those relations in training, then they're locked in, and this model does not learn anything new from the moment when it is given to us to operate. The only thing that it has a certain crutch of a memory. If you enter a memory, if you enter into dialogue with a model, you have a question answer, where the question answer is sort of recorded only in the text form, and every enter sends this whole sequence of text and spews out the answer based on the history. This is what Nolan did in Memento, with a guy who wrote out everything that happened on the pieces of paper, and he had to read that to remember where he is, because his working memory did not. Long-term memory did not update, and he only had working memory. It's the same situation with this model. It has to have the whole history of our conversation supplied and processed, and the model does not change until the corporation will not train the next model of corporation, which includes everything that we put in the meantime into the model when we spoke to it. So the next model of the artificial intelligence is is richer by what we put in the model. So when we enter the interaction, the model itself does not change. So coming to the hallucination, it's another term that has this baggage of certain erroneous thinking. As you probably know, these models can sometimes talk real bullshit, especially in the areas where they have no real knowledge. They come up with all sorts of answers. I once asked a ChatGPT model if it likes zoo, and depending whether, I mean, it always said, yeah, I love zoo. The families go there, etc. And but there's no zoo in Lublin. This is a typical case of model hallucination, because model got association. It didn't have any information. He said that Lublin is an average size of a town in Poland. Average size cities in Poland have a zoo. So and it came up with a zoo, and then it started to come up with a new reality. So this is something that we call hallucinations in case of a model. The problem is consistent in fact that you cannot get rid of those hallucinations, because it's not 5-10% of hallucinations is a lie, and the rest is truth. No, everything they do is hallucinate. They just learn certain information, they build certain relations, and based on that, they hallucinate answers. This is actually the surprising thing is that 95% of the hallucinations are actually in line with reality, but the only thing these systems do, they confabulate. They come up with hallucinated stories. But exactly as we imagine things about reality, anthropomorphizing a bit right now. But this is just a working comparison. Please remember that. Just as we imagine a part of reality, and then we undertake certain activities and we verify whether what we came up with about reality is true and is in line with reality or not. Because the only sense of these models is us who are interacting with it, then we are the testing point whether what the model hallucinates is true or not. So we have this role of the verifier, of the editor, the censor, who tells the model if they're thinking right. I would like to encourage you, because this is important from the point of view of the whole interaction. Don't think about the model as something that it does anything by itself. The only thing it does every time is the human AI system. This is the whole system that generates something. It's you who navigate this model. It's you who check the answer. This is the whole system that creates something, not AI by itself and not myself only, but it's the system of me plus AI. This is the thing, this is the system that generates output and verifies whether this output is sort of in line with the future, whether it's true or if it's not. That's why difficult questions start to arise. Whether these systems have so emotionality, to what extent they're creative, to what extent they are aware. I'm very far away from telling you ex cathedra whether there's emotionality or something else, but basing on what we said so far, if we should not anthropomorphize these systems by trying to search for them the same emotionality we have in humans, the same awareness we have in humans, because it's a totally different system. So maybe there are phenomena which functionally are the same as emotions as in humans, or awareness in humans are functionally are creative, so they steer the model to some extent, but by themselves it will not be the same love, it will not be the same fear that we have as humans, because they do not have the same embodiment and the same senses. They have the different embodiment and different senses from ourselves. So if there are any phenomena like this, they look very different and they're very difficult to discern for us because they are something else. And the last of the erroneous beliefs that stem from the language we use, because we say artificial intelligence, as I mentioned already in the beginning, it's not a single artificial intelligence. These are many systems of artificial intelligence. And what we should strive to, what we should think about, is the ecological system of artificial intelligences which also interact with each other, and not one single artificial intelligence with which we are supposed to deal. And the thinking that there's one artificial intelligence causes a big problem, because the majority of people have this sort of mental shortcut consisting in that artificial intelligence is ChatGPT, so in a way it's OpenAI. No. Every model is unique, every model is different. There's plenty of models already now. Right now there are 500,000 models in Hugging Face for text generation and for generation of Hugging Face is a platform where all these models and all the companies and that develop this work. Hugging Face.
I tak jak mówię, tych modeli jest bardzo, bardzo dużo.
There's plenty of such models, and one thing we should really avoid for social reasons is monopolizing the market of AI, because this means dominating by one worldview and one way of creating content in the cultural space. So we need to, from the very outset, we need to think about them as AI systems and not a single AI that is being developed by a single company.
1 milion już jest. Okay.
1 million of artificial intelligence, so it grows pretty fast. Oh, sorry, I pressed end again.
Okay. Teraz co w związku z tym?
So what about it? I'm getting to a more concrete things.
Nie za bardzo konkretnie.
Maybe still not too concrete, so don't expect too much, but it's too...
Pierwszą rzeczą jest to, że
the first thing is
mamy tendencję,
that we have a tendency when we're thinking about this as a technology that reproduces certain things. Paradoxically, it leads us to a situation in which inadvertently we lend ourselves to control of those models. We have a situation in which, if it is a tool, and if this tool let's say I'm writing a script. I'm writing this script. I will ask AI to correct just one sentence. I said, okay, it corrected the sentence very well. But then to the next chapter, I just have an idea. So please develop this idea for me. This is not a process that takes place. So this is, I would say, this is a step-by-step process. It doesn't, it's gradual process. You say, okay, for the next script, I just have points. Can you write a script according to those points? Okay, and then you say, maybe you should write everything from the outset. I will tell you what the idea is, and I will develop that into sub-points, etc., etc. So if we do not notice that, we leave control to those systems. We leave the power to those systems. What systems of values are being presented and what is happening there, and that's one problem. But then we reduce ourselves to the role of curators. But here the answer is not that simple. But there's a question: if the curator is the curator not an author too? I mean, yes. I mean, you create a new art out of works of works he operates on. I would even say risky maybe, but maybe isn't that the role of a director in a movie who just outsources thing, because you will have this the cinematographer will make the image, the scriptwriter wrote a script, and the author of costumes will suggest costumes, and I as the director, I'm sorry, I'm talking that as a director too, so I'm not trying to offend you. If I'm offending you, I'm offending myself too. And then the costume designer will prepare something, and I will select props. I'm just prompting other people about what I want to achieve. And then out of these prompts, I select what I will prepare as a final movie. So the interaction with AI systems is exactly the same as the interaction of the director with entities with create outputs, and out of which we select and create a whole. But then, in this logic, it is dangerous because who is the final curator here? The final curator here is the audience. So this, you can see it very well in how the musical market changes, because at first it is so that it's the producers, the musical companies were boycotting AI, because AI and music is not a way to go. But in a while they said, yeah, but if we train our own models on these artists, well, we don't really need to pay the artists because we can create this music ourselves. They are not necessary, we'll pay them some money, but in the next step, the streaming platforms decides, okay, why should we pay these publishing houses if we can train our own model that will do music for us? So again, another piece of the supply chain is deleted, and then we have the audience who says, okay, I can prompt it myself, and at the end of the day, the whole value chain closes down. That's why there's this fear, whether it's the programmers or, of course, interpreters, translators, we know about them for a long time, or all sorts of artists, that AI will take away the jobs. As long as we think about culture as a making products, then it will. There's not a single chain link that can survive this, because with time you can see that on the example of videos and music and etc. With time things will develop in such a way that if we develop things to consume, products to consume, AI will make them more attractive, better smelling, more palatable. So we stand no chance against AI. But what I've been postulating here already last year is that there is a totally different approach to culture, which protects us fully from AI. It's in the category in that culture is a communication, is a building of community, is building of a meeting space between those who wants to say something and those who wants to hear something. And this makes me this sort of in effect the effect is that I'm not alone and I want to be with other people and not with a machine. So in a moment when we try to approach culture not as something that produces wares or goods for the market that are consumed, but something that builds a community and exchanges things between humans, I think from that point of view, with such approach, the artificial intelligence is not any threat to us. It can be a partner. On the other side of this, the control of artificial intelligence. But if the natural reaction is if we need to take control, it's the reverse of what I was saying before, and that's why we're building this architecture of control, which are restraining the systems, leading the systems towards what they should do. The problem is, however, that these systems, because they are complex systems, because they are associative, as I said, these systems are really fundamentally non-controllable. We can lead them to a certain way. We can lead them to certain outputs. However, the effect of their work and the way how they work, and I'm not talking here. I'm not talking that the fundamentally they're uncontrollable. It's like that it stems from mathematics. That because complex systems are not predictable from the mathematics point of view. So this control is always illusory. It's always limited. So what I'm suggesting and what we were discussing here before the attempt which is most effective from my point of view
stanięcie wobec
is
tego zjawiska, jakim jest sztuczna inteligencja, i wchodzenie z nim w interakcję.
so entering into interaction for me, it's entering interaction with artificial intelligence just like with a partner.
To znaczy, to nie jest, jeśli będziecie
So if you will be trying to control everything in those systems, let's say I have a vision and I want to have concrete vision down to a pixel, then probably you will be frustrated by interactions with those systems, regardless how good outputs they would produce for you, because these systems are to a certain extent autonomical. It's autonomous, and it makes the things they feel is sensible. Of course, you can get very interesting results, but only in a dialogue with the system. So sending a certain information, they respond something based on their associations, just like when you work with another person. At the stage where you receive that output, you look at it and you check it and you say, okay, I like this, but I would like to have it differently. But I didn't think about this. I'll think about it. And you get another input and another and another. And in this process, not in single act, you get to a result which are interesting, which are satisfying artistically, in terms of content too, or from any other point of view. So out of this thinking, what those systems actually are, for me, this is what stems for me, how to approach these systems, not as tools, but as something that you enter into dialogue with. I mentioned that before. This is, I would say, this is where what I started with ends. Starting from the very beginning, coming back to the very beginning, starting from script writing to Final Cut. This is clickbait. Everything I said here is from script to Final Cut at every stage of entering interaction with these systems. However, allow me, as I have the occasion to point your attention to one more thing that is a bit more off topic, but from my point of view extremely important. The question is how this AI relates to culture, how culture relates to the artificial intelligence. And first I wanted to sort of pour over how culture works. We have this tendency, especially in all sorts of meetings of institutions, you can hear that culture is a sector. It's a sector of economy, of course. It produces the creative industries that produce certain things. They are in the certain economic turnover. I just wanted to turn this around. It's not culture is not the sector of economy. It's the economy that is a part of culture, because culture is what decides, according to which we decide what is important and what's not important. What is the system of values? And I'm not talking about something very lofty, but about very simple discernment. What is important, what is not important, and what's the chain of importance. And only this and this is how we segregate things which we believe are more important and which are less important, also economically. So I would reverse this sort of meaning. So AI, which is trained in the internet, is a sort of a culture in a box. Here quite often you get this, you hear this, that artificial intelligence is theft. It's not the artificial intelligence is theft. It's not when the theft is performed, when it's trained, but the moment when the culture, the model that is built on the whole of culture. It's not an algorithm, it's a certain informative structure based on a whole culture on which this model was trained, and then somebody puts that in a box, which is called, for example, ChatGPT, and says, this is mine, and I will give you access to this. This is where the theft takes place. Because why, on what right somebody puts all the culture in a box and demands money for accessing this? This is the biggest problem. with the theft, and this is where the theft takes place. In putting in a box and sales of something that is available to all of us, not in the model itself. If the model is open source, it's available to everyone so that everyone can use it, just like they can use culture. We can all use culture, then everything is okay. It's not AI is the threat, it's the corporations that develop AI and monetize them as they do, they are the threat. They're culturally problematic, and from any point of view, by the way. There was also this sort of point of view that was expressed recently, that AI is not a tool. I had this feeling that this is a very non-comparative point of view, because the corporations like Google, Meta, OpenAI, Microsoft, they all sell to us a product. We're giving you a tool. For me, this narrative about tools is but I was very astonished recently. There's a guy called Mustafa Suleyman. He used to be in Google. He opened another company. Right now he's in Microsoft. He's the head of the whole AI branch. So it's a person very deeply tied to corporative thinking, and you can find on TEDx. He had a lecture 2-3 months ago about this. That no, artificial intelligence is not a tool. Artificial intelligence is a being, and we brought this being here. I said, how do they comprehend that they will be able to monetize on this? Everybody said, if this is a being, it has to be given rights and ethical, questions, etc. How he will deal with that? And it occurred that he managed, because the narrative that changes from the point of view of Silicon Valley is they're not doing tools anymore. At this point, they're giving us God as a service, $20 per month, not too much. And their role is not the role of technologists that are working over the technology, but they become the priests. They are like Prometheus. They bring us this knowledge and this omnipotent being, but it's them who know the best how to communicate with this being, and this will do it for us, and they will build for us this church of holy artificial intelligence. That's why. So don't follow this narrative. Don't get manipulated by that, because this is very, very difficult socially. This is a narrative about power, which these corporations try to force upon us. But coming back to the culture again, right now we have this convergence of all the crises. We have different crises which converge at one point in time. We have ecological crisis, economic crisis, we have geopolitical crisis, and a system that we don't know what the consequences will be. This also a form of the development of AI is also a sort of the technological crisis, because nobody knows where it will end. But we individually, but also socially, we have a tendency to respond to crisis in exactly the same way. It's fight, flight, or denial response. So denying is just like don't look up. Have you seen that movie? That nothing's happening really, and this is the same situation with the AI. Some people say that no, these are just algorithms. They will not do anything to us. And yes, we'll turn them off when we need, etc. And they can't do too much. So this is denial. We have the fight fraction. So the doomers say, no, like we are in such a horrible situation with AI that we can only bomb data centers and fight at any cost with the future. Flight or escaping means like it doesn't apply to me. That's not true either.
śmiem twierdzić, że nie ma...
I would venture to say that there is not a part of social life that will not be touched very strongly by the development of these systems. Therefore, these reactions cause the increase in the existential fear. You can see also you can also look at the ecological process, the environmental crisis and economic crisis. The answers are exactly the same: fight, flight, or denial. So at the social level, we reproduce what we intend to do on the individual level. And of course, it has its consequences: the increase of a level of aggression, depression, and neuroticism. However, I do think that there is a parallel situation which gives you hope. Instead of fight, flight, or denial, it's I would say it's a sort of a dialogue that I meant to you. Don't allow yourself to be controlled by the systems, but enter the dialogue and cooperation with the systems. And at this level, social level, I believe that this change is starting to come about. That when we start to move away from a transactional, violence-based and controlling transactions interactions to two-sided interaction, when we fight for substance at every level, where we start to believe in the creation of values on the social level and in interactive level, and we have to build certain communities. And what is the basis for all this is the thinking in the systemic and ecosystemic ways. By ecosystemic, I don't mean only biological ecosystems, but also social and also technological levels. And only this paradigm that the social, where the complexity appears, I think this is the solution to many of those dilemmas that we are stumbling upon right now, or maybe just a direction where we should find the solutions. Just not to make these empty words. If you look at the whole YouTube sphere, of course, you get there a lot of short stuff, a very sort of shallow things, but I do not remember times when so many very long and very popular podcasts, talks, discussions are about. We should start to talk about values. We talk about existentialism, about human existence, and people need that, and people do that to one another. They started to talk about it en masse. And I also do have a feeling that, thankfully, I think it will sort of, we have this feeling of that the people are weary of nihilism, because it became banal. Everything goes bad, etc. So what? So stop moaning and do something about it. And the constructive approach suddenly starts to appear to change something in this reality. And in order to point to that this trend, this tendency is there, I don't know, I'm observing this technosphere and what's happening there, how individual people are sort of giving their opinion there for a longer time. And I don't remember times when engineers and heads of technological companies would talk about values and the future of humanity and about what is socially needed to the scale that we see today. I think at this moment, there are no important technologies except for Jan LeCun, who would not clearly go into these domains of philosophy, ethics, and would not take care of these topics, because the zeitgeist is the following, that we feel that we need to do something about it, that we have to reevaluate our models of value models, because they stopped they fail to work right now. And artificial intelligence is a catalyst of the change. It will force upon us by how new and socially phenomenon it is. It forces us to ask ourselves these questions: what is the creativity? How do we differ from those systems? What is the community? What are the society? Who we are? If these systems are different, how are we different from them? This forces us to think about ethics, but also about all other non-human agents that we realize. What is the role of corporation not only in economy but also in culture? What is the impact on individual people and their values? Because we have non-human agents, as like corporations, states, which we know they take part in this global huge game about what the reality looks like, and that we have to be in interaction with them. Artificial intelligence is nothing new. It's a new phenomenon of the kind of corporation ecosystems and states, and only through a prism of looking at AI as a physical phenomenon. It's a complex system. Only through this we can start to think how we can interact with it, how we can write this scripts with this, how we can create video with this, how to create artifacts of culture with it. And only then we can enter a purposeful discussion and interaction with those systems. We can lead to a situation when what is an output there has value for ourselves, has values for our audience, has cultural value per se. Okay, I can leave that as a commentary.
Wynika to z tego tylko i wyłącznie. Potrzebujemy tej bezczelności.
We need to have this brazenness and humility at the same time.
Sposoby myślenia.
Those modes of, because the things we're used to think, they don't work anymore in relation to those phenomenons that we have. And even though we are all kids in the fog, children in the fog, we don't know where we're going and where it's going. We have to select the direction on some basis. So we need to ask questions: why and what are we doing things for, and how do they look like? And I encourage you to that. Thank you very much. This is all from me. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me.
Tak.
Two things. We didn't mention the environmental part. Right now we have this focus on sustainable development. Especially, it started from corporations. Right now it gets to film production too. And I do think that it will be a certain standard, hopefully, a certain norm. How does AI relate to use of sustainable use, how to use these, how does it relate to sustainable development? That's my first question. And the second question would be, this is a very complicated issue. There is not one simple answer to that, because there's several aspects you have to take into account. So saying that the comparison, that's if you produce one image is equal to loading an iPhone, that you have so many liters of water to cool the servers for one prompt. It's problematic because you can easily verify that this is not true. I'm able to run a whole simple model on my computer. So how much energy I will use, how much water I would use when it comes just inference. It's how much the computer is operating during its answer. It's usually a few seconds, maybe several dozen seconds if it's complicated, because it uses exactly as much energy as it's being operational during that time. This, if we're talking about inference itself. But if we're entering into training, which requires these to be like gigantic, for the biggest LLMs, for example, it requires gigantic server centers, data centers combined together, which are used to prepare the training of a single model for months on end. So training ChatGPT 4 is like it's horrible amounts of energy. Then you have a problem. So from this point of view, it's a dramatically bad from the ecology point of view. But then again, like in complex systems, it has its own consequences. It has two consequences. One of them, which is if you were a techno optimist, and it's very controversial. Okay, but if we develop these systems to be so good, they will solve the climate problem. They would tell us what we should do to get the CO2 out of our atmosphere, and the problem will solve itself. So we cannot allow ourselves not to train those huge models, because if we allow this, we will fail to reach the solution of the problems. This is one narrative. But a more pragmatic narrative, and what we see already is that, because of the fact that the need for energy is so huge for those systems, and at the same time the pressure on corporations is so big that they cannot do this out of coal. This speeds up the development of green energy arising from the need for energy for AI, which needs to be clean energy, is such that it sped up the work on the small modular reactors, because there is a big demand for it. So the secondary effect that we can have a much greener and much more effective sources of energy, because these models eat up so much energy. So this is not a simple answer. In a small scale, if you look, in the small scale, this is not bad. This is not a problem. In a bigger scale, it's horrible. And on a very even bigger scale, if you take secondary results, it's not that bad. So I can't give you a simple answer to that, whether the development of these systems is positive or negative. One more question. The devaluation of all these values was very fast through the large number of these systems. So I was wondering if it stops being monetizable. Is there a possibility that it will not happen because these systems are being sold for small money? It's not being profitable for the corporations anymore. Can you reverse this trend, reverse this process? And again, it will be it's a complicated. First, if there were predictions related to Silicon Valley, how this will develop, what they would not do in what time, which were very optimistic, but it happens so that the social adoption of these systems is much, much lower than they wanted. Even more, among those few percent that use those systems, maybe a pro-mile uses the systems in a way that uses their potential. Because the majority will ask a question, is there a zoo in Lublin? So the adoption of this, which also arises from the understanding what these systems can do and how they work, what they should be used for, what they should not be used for, is much slower, which caused, to a certain extent, a decrease in investment in AI. I would not, of course, exaggerate that either. Recently, each of those corporations got like billions of dollars to develop from the market to develop AI. So it's not that this is decreasing. those who go away from OpenAI, they don't go away from AI per se. They go away from a toxic company. It's one of the least ethical companies that work on this market, that operate on this market. But they move to another companies like Google, Anthropic. So the people who take care of AI, and they are not disillusioned by AI. They are disillusioned by the corporations that do AI.
Natomiast jak to będzie długofalowo, to też ciężko jest stwierdzić.
To what extent this trend will continue, it's very difficult to say. The development of AI
jest przerażające tempo.
I mean, the tempo of development was astounding. There was a petition of several thousand researchers to stop the development of AI to maybe for 1.5 years for cybersecurity or security research could catch up with it to at least some extent. People laughed at it to some point, but then the Congress started hearings and AI Act was created faster, etc. So it had some effect. However, paradoxically, the adoption on the market causes this development maybe not to slow down, but its momentum slows down, being slowed down. And I think this is very good because thanks to this we're able both socially and politically and legally to react better to what's happening, and there's a higher chance that the awareness of what we deal with will be higher with time, and that we will be wiser in approaching to this phenomenon. But I am for slowing it down, but I don't see a chance for the direction to turn, because even the current systems, we are discovering those systems even up to now. We didn't even manage to realize what they can do, and there are new things appearing, and it has this competence and it had that competence. But then again, the next models and systems are trained on a larger scale. So if these companies build nuclear plants, they do not expect this to be stopped. Thank you. I was wondering about the practical consequence of what you were saying about the actions of those corporations and sort of the cultural theft. I was wondering what sort of solution you would see to that. Because depending on how you see this, people we use culture, we use some products out of it, and then we sell those products. So this is a product that seems to be natural, and I was wondering where is this element which is the overuse, I would say, where you should put a barrier in terms of acquiring the data on which we teach, that the people from whom we take the data should get some sort of money for this, or also some sort of reimbursement for this, or interest, or should it be open source for you from the outset? What is your approach?
Okay. Tutaj powiem pewną rzecz, którą nie za bardzo mamy przestrzeń, żeby tutaj rozwinąć, ale zaznaczę na zasadzie właśnie swojego zdania tym. I believe that the real problem is at the very base in the concept of intellectual property. Intellectual property is an oxymoron. You cannot own something that is intellectual. But this is controversial. I mean, that's my point of view. But it doesn't change much in our situation, because so what that we say that if we have economic system which is based exactly on that and on this sort of understanding. And so how do you operate in such a system? So on one hand, if you look from a broader perspective, and the first option is to find a different formula of dealing with things, how to pay people for the intellectual work. On the other hand, if we're talking about AI, I think that the only at this moment ethical solution is open source, and open source is developing very quickly. Open source in AI, open source in no other place is so
strong as in AI. This is where AI is threatening corporations, what they can do, the open source. And thanks to what is happening in open source, we have models which are local. Like in Poland, we have Bielik, which is at a very early stage, but it's being developed. And models which are in every country, models which are built within frames of individual institutions, which you can adapt to yourself, etc., etc. Thanks to that, we have an AI system. We have many different systems which have different axiologies behind them, and thanks to this is fairly socially healthy. On the other hand, is it possible that those huge corporate systems will not exist? It's impossible. We need those big models to develop the smaller models too. So this is the whole ecosystem that is needed. However, to what extent should we solve within the frames that we deal with the system based on intellectual property, within the system that how to develop a system that learn only on this but put things in a box? I don't know. I don't know how to solve this internal conflict. This is the I would say the internal conflict that comes from the conflict between intellectual property that stems up to the level of culture and this whole cultural area and somebody saying that it's his property. We'll talk about that. There'll be debates. The courts will be debating. There will be different rulings, and we will get to a certain consensus at some point, rather than a solution that we can come up with. We will negotiate that socially somehow. Thank you.